we have an interview with Talal Al-Ulaqi, who's a managing director at Hasa Energy in Oman. And this interview is made by Ricardo Friolio and Naima Kikerio. So before we go to the panel, let's go to the interview.
Please.
The terminology of energy transition is widely published in the media, but it's loosely defined, and in terms of the implementation, it lacks clarity in the action plans. My name is Talal Al-Ulaqi. I came from Oman, working as a professional energy engineer. I chose the topic of energy because we are living on an area which is quite isolated from easy access to natural river or natural winds. So we rely heavily on the energy that's generated from natural resources. If you look to the energy transition topics, there is a big drive that we have to switch, for example, to solar or wind or another type of geothermal. But if you look to this, for example, solar and wind, it's made of extractable mining activities where we are going back to the square one. So it needs to have a very good life cycle assessment from where we are building that tools of alternative energy or energy transition. There is a big gap between the policymakers and the industrial professional and also the societies. So this is very important to embed it on a strategy, where this strategy, it engages all the stakeholders in terms of societies, in terms of professional, in terms of the industry, and also in terms of policymakers, so they can look at from all elements where they can make it executable and they make it actionable in the current world condition, which is we are in a very demand of an energy switch currently with the current global geopolitical change around the world. As a speaker in that forum, I recommend to focus on educations, especially in the early stages of generation, where we can develop tools and techniques that can ensure energy transition to be more effective. So education at early stages is very important, where we can develop that concept of energy transitions to the future generation.
Investing in the future with a young change maker. I'm very happy that we saw some images from the seminar. So for the new guests joining, we have 45 change makers from over 20 different countries who have debated and had dialogue for 9 days here in Lugano. So this was a little contribution. Zach, what's the program now?
So we're going to have our second panel now, or energy transition, and sustainable development in the MEM region. And who better to chair this than the one and only Emiliano boss from the Radio Swiss Televisione. Welcome, Emilio.
Emiliano will have wonderful guests. So online and connected from Cyprus will be the Minister of Energy and Commerce and Industry, Her Excellency Natasa Pilides. Thank you, welcome. Then we have de France, Laurent Vivier, also online. We really hope they will make it next time to Lugano. He's a Senior Vice President, Middle East and North Africa for Exploration Production of Total Energy. Bienvenue. And then we have two wonderful young change makers. Ahla sahla, Omaima Doukkane min Maghreb, from Morocco. Welcome. Last but not least, two Cypriots on the panel today, one online and one live. Andreas Tornaritis, welcome. Please.
Thank you so much, and welcome to this very energetic panel. We are ready for a very interesting conversation. Thanks to Uzi, to the MEM, for inviting me and having the honor of being here, trying to have a deep conversation about one of the key points. I mean, we've been talking about energy, gas, oil. We're talking about the situation in Ukraine. Now we move specifically to the MEM, to the MENA region, try to see how things are going there. So the energy transition has started. It's nothing new, but still some of these countries have today the lowest share of renewable energies, with some differences, and we will try to get into some of these. Of course, Morocco, of course we will hear from Cyprus, something is happening in the Mediterranean Sea, but it's clear that these countries are shifting away from their long-standing dependence on oil and gas, despite being, some of them, one of the biggest producers. So let's start with a couple of examples before giving the floor to our guests. Saudi Arabia, with this project, this city called NEOM. It's a beginning, it's something that MBS has presented years ago, but finally it appears that it's becoming real. First tenders will be probably issued in the next months for starting this futuristic city northwest of the Arabic Peninsula on the Red Sea. Someone is objecting that it's impossible to realize what the project is planning. It's difficult to imagine this kind of a city which will be powered only by renewable, but at least it's something that is taking shape. And of course, being Saudi Arabia, the second largest oil producer, and probably, as everybody knows, the largest, the bigger holder of oil reserves. So something is happening, and it's not the only thing happening in Saudi Arabia. Something has happened in Morocco. We were supposed to have, and I'm really sorry it didn't work, but we were supposed to have with us Leila Ben Ali, the Minister of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development. So the two are strictly connected and intertwined. So she's not with us, but we will talk about Morocco because it's a very interesting case. It's a country that is doing better than some European countries. I think we are now around 37-38% of the energy produced out of renewable energies, and Morocco implemented different strategies in the years, starting from 1992, Rio Conference, the UN Earth Conference, and so it's a very good model, and we will hear about some interesting good practices, so a model that can be maybe replied somewhere else, so telling us that indeed in the region there is a lot of things happening. It's very dynamic despite the difference. And we will start from Cyprus, and I'm very happy and honored to have with us today Her Excellency Natasa Pilides. Thank you so much for joining us online. You are the Minister of Energy, Commerce and Industry since 2020. You have been in the government. You were Deputy Shipping Minister, so you've been promoting your country around the Mediterranean and around the world. Now you are in charge of a very important portfolio. And let's start with something happened recently, a few days ago. A new gas discovery was announced by Eni Cyprus and Total Energies, and we have the chance to have here also Mr. Vivier from Total. We will ask also his perspective on that. But for you, for Cyprus as a government, as a 1.2 million people living there, you are part of European Union, you are a beautiful island in the middle of the Mediterranean, and still there is gas. We are talking about transition, but let's go back 1 second to the fossil fuel. What does it mean, this discovery, geopolitically speaking, for your country?
Thank you, Emiliano. First of all, let me express how delighted I am to be with you today and how proud I am also of Andreas, who is one of our change makers from Cyprus and is on this panel. It's really exciting, and what a wonderful setup as well. Unfortunately, I can only be joining by phone this time, but hopefully I'll be able to see everyone in person soon. Indeed, I mean, as you've already said, we are facing a war which is creating some very difficult and unfortunate circumstances, first of all for the people of Ukraine, but also for everyone around the world who is impacted by the consequences, the indirect consequences that have really changed our everyday reality. And particularly with the winter coming up, one sort of worries about what the exact repercussions are going to be. And one of the things that we are alerted to is the importance of the green transition and the importance of becoming self-reliant and diversifying our energy routes and our energy sources, both as European Union, but also on a worldwide level. And so, of course, as you very correctly sort of note, fossil fuel is something that we should be moving away from. And I think that is something that needs to remain the long-term goal, because not only of the impact it has on the environment, but also because of the potential it can unlock in terms of us being self-reliant. However, as we heard in the interview earlier, just a second ago, I think it's very important to recognize that we need to put some specific goals that are very, very well sort of thought out and planned out on the road to that transition. And I think natural gas being one of the lower of the friendlier, let's say, fossil fuels in terms of the pollution and the impact that it has on the environment is something that needs to be treated as a bridge goal which can actually help towards the green transition rather than impeding it. And so certainly in Cyprus, our strategy encompasses natural gas as one of the components of our energy mix, which is going to be phased out, of course, to zero by 2050 as per our green goal, our Green Deal goals. So I would say that it's very difficult to balance the short-term measures that we need to be taking, both to reduce the energy cost for the consumer, particularly for households, and especially households which are facing energy poverty and difficult, challenging times ahead, whilst maintaining our goals for green transition. It's a very difficult thing to do because it's very tempting to give all these short-term measures which will have a reduction in the price of electricity with whatever means that electricity is being produced at the moment, whilst actually spending funding that could have actually been available for green transition. So striking the right balance between short-term measures and long-term measures is actually very key. And another thing that's very key, which I'm sure Mr. Vivier would be able to comment on, is how if we do have natural gas reserves, as in the case of Cyprus, we need to have a certain clear view, and particularly the companies need to have a clear view on how long-term their investments can be. And so when we have findings such as the one we announced last week, which is very exciting and creates prospect, companies need to know that if they invest in some very expensive infrastructure to make it all happen, that they will actually have clients for the next 20 or 30 years, or however long it takes for their investments to be for the return on their investment to be worthwhile. So there's a lot of issues that need to be factored in, and as I say, we need to strike the right balance and always keep the green transition as the ultimate goal.
Thank you so much, Minister Pilides, and thanks for this view about this balance that you need. You have something beneath the sea, but you also have something looking ahead in front of you, and so that would be interesting also to follow up on how your government will manage this kind, will be able to think about this kind of a balance, which is very challenging. And I take the issue, the point that you just raised up, and I turn it to Mr. Vivier. So thank you so much. Bonjour, bienvenue, and thank you for being with us today. On the one hand, you have a new discovery that has been jointly announced by TotalEnergies and in Cyprus, as we mentioned. But at the same time, I'm already asking you, which is do you have the clear view or vision on long-term investment that Minister Pilides was just, in a way, raising to you? So there's some oil and gas, you found something, gas actually, not oil, but how do you see ahead of that? What's going to happen from now on? And how is important for your company and on the European market this recent discovery? Thank you.
Firstly, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very glad and very honored to be among you. The discovery is firstly a good news. What we've got to acknowledge when we talk about natural gas, and I fully concur with Her Excellency about the essential role of natural gas within the energy transition, is the scale effect. Natural gas is an energy which requires a lot of capital to be developed and size in order to absorb the cost of this logistical chain. And I think this discovery is very welcomed in Cyprus because it adds on to former discoveries, so more resources, which will allow us to reach faster the scale that is needed to develop those resources, which are badly needed at the moment for the European market. And I think that is really important. That's exactly what we were looking at. When you are asking me how important it is, I think it's exactly about this, is that it complements discoveries which have been made already and which will allow us much faster to develop those resources because we attain the size in terms of project development. We will continue exploring. So we've made this discovery and the platform is staying in Cyprus, and we'll drill another well just next to it in order to confirm and possibly to add on some further resources. So I hope we will have some further good news before the end of the year. But it is definitely important. In terms of development, it takes always time with natural gas, but I think we can go quickly. And definitely today, the European market badly needs this natural gas, as we know, because of the dramatic events which are taking place in Ukraine. And I think which have prompted, and maybe Her Excellency will be able to comment on this, which have prompted, which I think is a radical change in the approach towards natural gas within Europe. Being a bit cynical, you had a lot of energy ministers or energy transition ministers from Europe, which were traveling to the Middle East and North Africa area 1 year ago, asking for a faster energy transition toward renewable. You've seen those same ministers in the past few months and past few weeks going to each producing country in the Middle East and North Africa, begging for more oil and more gas. And I think it's, apart from the short-term supply issues that we are facing, I think it will definitely prompt something which is, we need to give vision. That's exactly what Her Excellency was aiming at. In order to develop natural gas, we as industrials develop those infrastructure, whether on the producing end or on the receiving end. When you talk about, for example, LNG receiving terminals in Europe, you need a visibility around 20 to 25 years. We did not have this visibility before. And it's not a coincidence that you didn't have a lot of LNG receiving terminals in Europe, which have been developed in the past few years. Because we didn't have this visibility. And the main message was given by Europe is that we don't need it. And I think it's important, and I hope those events, at least in one of the few positive consequences in terms of putting energy security to the front in Europe, will show that natural gas has this role to play, is perfectly compatible with a credible energy transition for Europe. It's not what we call a destination fuel. It's definitely a transition fuel, which is essential, complementing renewable energy efficiency to attain a credible path and a bearable path in terms of cost affordability and availability of energy, which is essential towards the net zero ambition 2050.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vivier. You touched so many interesting points. It should be enough having a look at what's happening on the oil market prices in Europe and Amsterdam, where I think we are around 1,000% more than a year ago. So it's an issue that it's really calling governments, private companies, and consumers, because at the end, Minister Pilides was talking about how much it costs to the families, to the people, the energy impact of this crisis in Ukraine, and what's happening also on the market in Russia, and with Russia and the relation, the sanctions, the impact. I would like to a quick follow-up with Minister Pilides about the balance you were mentioning between the transition and the new gas, but also that gas is interesting for your neighbors. And of course, we know the situation, the long-standing political situation in Cyprus, with the occupation of a part of the island by Turkey. And already from Ankara, we heard some voices saying, wait a second, we might have a say in this new gas. Are you worried that it might be, in a way, preventing the dialogue, or it might fueling up, I'm sorry for using fueling about gas, but fueling up some tensions with the Turkish government, the fact that they are already claiming a sort of overlapping claims on this new field?
Well, of course, we're always watching the developments very closely and always trying to resolve issues that are arising in the context of international law and the law of the sea. And certainly that is the basis on which all the contracts which have been signed with our partners like Total Energy and Eni and Chevron and ExxonMobil, Qatar Energy, various other stakeholders have been based on. However, more than being worried, I wish that we could say that we could be hopeful that natural gas is going to give an impetus to Turkish Cypriots and to Turkey, which is always involved in the peace talks between the two sides, to actually find a fair solution which is acceptable by both parties, and that would definitely be what we wish to do. We do not wish to exclude Turkish Cypriots from the benefits of utilizing the wealth that we have, as you say, under the sea. And hopefully this can be a positive sort of motivational point of motivation for both parties to get involved in some practical and meaningful discussions. In the meantime, because we have seen, as you say, announcements and also other other acts by Turkey which would not be characterized as friendly in the past, and some recent announcements as well. We are in constant collaboration, conversation with the EU and the UN and other stakeholders in order to, highlight the fact that everything that is being done is within the scope of international law and to minimize the impact of any such actions.
Thank you so much. I go back 1 second before opening up the conversation to our guests. Mr. Vivier, you mentioned very interesting kind of a contradiction, the same foreign minister or energy ministers or anyway governments from the EU knocking at the door of some countries in the MEM region asking for more efforts towards the energy transition, and now back asking for fossil fuel. As we are speaking here, French President Macron is in Algeria in a conversation also about, they need gas, they need fossil fuel. Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi a few weeks ago went as well to Algeria. And I mean, it's clear that there is a different landscape after what's happened after the Russian aggression in Ukraine 6.5 months ago. You found your company found oil or gas actually in the Mediterranean. Can this region play a different role? Of course, everybody now in Europe is running to get gas. We know Germany and Italy are probably the most important buyers from Russian gas, but other countries are interested in diversifying their resources. So which could be the role that this area is playing in these circumstances?
I think it has a role which is becoming critical. I think for a few reasons. Firstly, and I hope it will be the case for Cyprus in the years to come, but for some of the countries, infrastructure does exist. And once again, coming back to natural gas, the cost of infrastructure is a huge part of the cost of the overall value chain. You've got to know roughly that when you are talking, for example, of gas which is exported from the US, when you take the gas of the US, the price of gas, domestic price in the US, in order to get it to Europe through LNG, you've got to multiply by 2 the price of domestic gas in the US. The cost of the logistical chain is massive. So you already have pipelines which do exist across the Mediterranean and come from Libya, they come from Algeria, they come from the Caspian Sea. And definitely those are pipelines. You have as well LNG terminals in Egypt, for example, in Algeria, which are not fully used today. So there is very quickly a potential to use more some existing facilities in order to increase the flows of natural gas towards Europe. And that's really what is changing, what is really making this area quite important. And then you have the medium term and the long term, and that's definitely exactly what we are talking about Cyprus or other discoveries. This is as well supplemented, and that's you are talking about the Mediterranean basin, and which is really important because it's even closer to Europe. We definitely saw as well a shift of interest towards the Middle East, for example. And we saw Qatar, for example, awarding some massive contracts for the development of more than 30 million tons of LNG, which will come on stream in 25-26. Definitely, this has prompted a lot of interest by European companies. And it's not a coincidence that among those 4 liquefaction trains which have been awarded, the majority of them have been awarded to European companies. So definitely an increasing shift towards those countries, because they have the resources, they would be able to develop them in the midterm and the long term, but as well, and I focus on this, they have today the logistical means to increase quickly the flows towards Europe, because those facilities today are existing and they are not fully used.
Thank you so much. We leave 1 second Cyprus and that area, and we go to Morocco. It's a very interesting case. I was mentioning in the beginning, a country that has really implemented strategies and policies towards the energy transition. I mentioned the Minister of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development is not with us today, but we are happy to have on the stage Omaima Doukkane. She's from Morocco. Thank you so much. Of course, you've been in conversation with your fellow colleagues these days, and I'm asking you if you can give us a couple of examples, good practices, something that it's really working. Of course, we know about these huge solar plants that are probably, I think, the biggest. Some of them are the biggest in the world. So we can see directly something, but it would be interesting to hear from you if you can give us a couple of good practices from your country.
Sure, thank you. So basically in Morocco, we have an accelerating ecosystem of energy, and the energy strategy that was basically elaborated almost a decade ago, tapped into 3 main pillars. And the first one is the renewable energy, the second one is energy efficiency, and the third one is regional integration. And as you might know, Morocco is the only African country that has a power cable to Europe. And at the same time, it is one of the key players in the Mediterranean energy plan and solar plan. And putting a pin on that, going back to the Noor solar project, it basically generates solar power systems from a mega-scale panel surface of approximately 1,921 square feet in Africa. So basically, it's one of the biggest. And we have more solar panel plants that are being in the building right now in different cities in Morocco. Basically, we'd say like Laayoune, Boujdour, Tarfaya, Ouarzazate, and so on. So as was also mentioned earlier regarding gas and natural gas transition, that we are basically becoming more predominant when it comes to the energy transition in this regard. And on a similar road, we also have the Water Energy Nexus, which is also like a plan for research and developments in different laboratories in Morocco. And it's kind of like focusing on creating getting the marine energy, focusing on that, and then bringing and generating power to the arid areas in Morocco, and also like the regional integration. This project is mainly going to be focused in Laayoune, which is the south of Morocco. And I would say also, like in this regard, we have a national network of green innovation laboratories. So mainly like we have specialized laboratories in the kingdom, but also like the research laboratories in the universities that we have in Morocco, of which some of them like focus on wind farms and on wind projects. And we're counting like 19 projects that are either already commissioned or they are in the progress. But one of the most exciting things that I wanted to share today is about how we are actually facing a pivotal moment for the North Africa and the Mediterranean, thanks to the partnership between Morocco and IRENA about the green hydrogen and clean economy. So like we were discussing earlier in the summit, that interlateral collaborations and also like regional relations are really necessary. So probably like when we get to see how energy is also being discussed and we're putting the emphasis on sustainable development, on green energy and so on, is really interesting. And I know that it sounds like very promising and very promoting to hear that there are a lot of efforts that are being applauded like throughout the region. But at the same time, we know that there are some specific key points that are like critically touching points about how can we have the inclusion of all the communities regarding these projects and these strategies, and also like the access and accessibility of all the communities to be part of these energy ecosystem and all the energy transition. But as Ford said, we cannot invent cars if we just keep thinking about how making our horses faster. So indeed, we have challenges like the cost of like innovation and the cutting edge technology and what have you. But at the same time, I think that progress is still progress. So like even if it's minimal, and I think that Morocco is working on a very good progress when it comes to the SDG number 7 and how to create like the energy transition in the region and all of that. But maybe like the cars was not as sustainable as a metaphor, but we can take the electric cars for that and put a pin on it. So yeah.
Thank you for this picture about the situation in your country. I think I've read that also on the agricultural side was recently, back as 2020, green agricultural strategy. So it's really covering a variety of fields, not only the innovation, not only the solar power, but also a kind of innovation. And I mean, it's a country that, of course, has a significant part of its GDP coming from the agricultural products and goods. So it's interesting that also in that field, something is happening. Yeah.
Right, indeed. So like we're working on transition in like different strategies in different fields, and we're just trying to merge everything to like come out with a certain strategy that incorporates all the parts of the sustainable energy, because we're not just talking about like declining or like decreasing or discouraging the use of fossil fuels or like mainly just working on effective policies, but it's also something that could be concrete, that could help the nation, especially like now that we're having like seasons of droughts and so on. So like if we can capitalize on all the potential that our country has and maybe the whole region has, it could be like really good for the transition itself.
Thanks. It's positive and inspiring. We say energetic panel, so listening to you and the dynamic situation and the fact that there are also some concrete goals. I mean, as far as I remember, 2020 was a goal that has not been reached, but again, there's another one already, which is probably it's a target for 2030, I guess, or 2025. So at least it's very dynamic, and there is the clear engagement of the kingdom, of the government, in reaching this kind of outcomes.
Right. Yeah, I
Please.
just wanted to add the fact that, yes, there are clear strategies and clear targets that we're trying to reach, but at the same time, it's like being a little bit ambitious, which is good and very applauded in this case, because as a country who's having like multilateral collaborations and cooperations around the region, it's really interesting to see that we're not only just looking for sustainable development and projects, but also like working for, you know, the net zero and maybe like working on nature positive approaches and having the whole like vision and perception around the industry.
Thank you. I go to the other young change maker with us on the stage. Thank you, Andreas Tornaritis, to being with us. You are from Cyprus, so and you work for Total. So be careful what you say. You are among two of your bosses. I'm kidding, of course, but it's very interesting your perspective as an expert, as an advisor on one of the biggest oil company in the world, Total, but also you're coming from Cyprus. So from your perspective, do you have first of all, any question you would like to raise to one of our guests here? That could be interesting because you probably know much better than me about your perspective.
Thanks a lot, Emiliano. Excellency, Mr. Vivier, Omaima, thank you for the very thought-provoking remarks. You gave us some really good for thought. I would like to say that Total Energies is actually an energy company that is now really becoming a major energy player. And what I would like to ask is that the global energy landscape is actually going through major shifts, changes. And I was wondering how are these changes affecting the EU-MENA energy relations? And I would like to refer to the energy interconnectors that are now currently under discussion for the Euroasia and Euro-Africa interconnector, whether there are any other similar projects that are maybe the East Med pipeline, and I was just wondering whether there are any similar projects under consideration.
Thank you. I would ask Minister Pilides first, and then Mr. Vivier, please.
Yes. For us, the electricity connection between Cyprus and Greece and Israel, of course, which is the Euroasia Interconnect mentioned by Andreas, is a very important project because it is the first one that we have on the pipeline, which is of such a great scale. We got approved for funding of 657 million from the EU to actually start implementing the project, and that's a huge amount of funds for a small country like Cyprus. So we're really excited to be able to actually embark on this project, and the government of Cyprus is supplementing with another 100 million because the total cost of connecting Cyprus to Greece is about 1.5 billion. And what this project opens up for us is, of course, lifting the energy isolation of Cyprus, which is one of the great problems that we have in increasing renewable energy in our energy mix to a large extent, because we are the only EU member state that's still not interconnected and integrated with the EU market. So that's a huge step for us. Second, in the let's say the chronological order of how things are going to go is the Euro-Africa Interconnector, which Andreas mentioned, which connects Egypt to Cyprus. So that will also connect up to the Cyprus-Greece leg that will hopefully start construction in before the end of this year. So whilst we do not have any other such large projects in implementation, another important thing for us, which I think was mentioned by Mr. Vivier, is actually being able to receive natural gas as EU countries as well. So we do have a project in progress of around 300 to 400 million in cost for building our FSRU pipeline to our FSRU unit in order to be able to accept and import natural gas from other countries initially, whilst we are in the process of developing our own natural gas resources. And finally, we do have a proposal from a company operating in Israel called Energean, which is a London-listed company with Greek origin. It has under its license a lot of our projects in Israel, and there is a potential of actually building a pipeline which would be bringing natural gas from Israel to Cyprus for onward export to the EU via ships, which again helps in the energy diversification of the EU, but it also adds to the infrastructure, which is so important and which Mr. Vivier mentioned. So, the more infrastructure we have in the region, the easier it is for companies to actually assess and hopefully decide positively on the viability of the various projects in the region. At the same time, another major project that needs to be done is how to connect our own natural gas resources with some sort of infrastructure in the region. So at the moment, the most advanced in those discussions is how to connect our Aphrodite field, which is managed by Chevron, and which has about 4.5 TCF of natural gas, according to the drillings that have taken place so far, the 2 drillings that have taken place so far there. How to connect that to Egypt and to probably Edfu in Egypt. So the company Chevron, together with Shell and NewMed Energy, which are the partners in this JV, are thinking about how best to connect, whether through a tieback solution or an autonomous solution, the Aphrodite gas field to Egypt. So those are mainly the major projects that are happening. We still have some sort of smaller scale projects that we really need to implement in the next few years, and that we are using the current EU funding for restructuring and for connecting Europe for the upgrade of our network, of our electricity grid, which is something really key in making us more receptive to renewable energy sources, and also energy storage projects, which again can be quite large scale because we are almost entirely reliant on solar energy in terms of our renewable energy sources. So we really, really need storage in order to be able to create a bigger upside for the use of renewables in our energy mix.
Thank you so much. I would say same question, Ms. Vivier, but I would like to add something because Minister Pilides was mentioning infrastructures. It's nothing that can be built overnight. It needs long vision, it needs time, it's costing. So the situation in the crisis in Ukraine with the Russian aggression is pushing EU to rethink, refocus the strategy about infrastructure. We know very well Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, something is very connected to Switzerland, by the way, and of course, this big investment, infrastructures, needs time and years. So you can go and knock in the door to some government asking for more gas or oil, but when it comes to infrastructure, so is EU too late? Are European countries late in that, or is there any chance to reorient the strategy?
Thank you, Emiliano. I think it's a very important question because we've got a challenge which is a short-term one against what has been before a long-term view in terms of developing infrastructure. It was basically taking 5 years to think about an importing terminal, or 5 years to think about a pipeline, and then 5 years to build it. That means 10 years, and we are definitely, and we can see today with what's happening in Europe, we cannot afford such a time frame. So we've got to be much shorter. So there are some possibilities today to increase the importing capacity, because we've got to acknowledge that today what would be the limiting factor in Europe in order to receive some natural gas next winter is not the natural gas availability worldwide. The limiting factor would be the import capacity of Europe. And so we need to work very quickly and add very quickly some importing capacity. We are, as TotalEnergies, working on developing very quickly, just a few months, an additional LNG import terminal in France. We are as well, we proposed adding another one just to supply Germany. So we can move faster, but definitely I would say those quick wins would still be marginal. We clearly need something as a signal in order to develop the pipelines which are necessary. The EU is reconsidering, for example, pipelines coming from Spain to France in order to benefit from the massive LNG import capacity in Spain. So it's definitely we need this. I would add one thing on what Her Excellency said. I think we've got to acknowledge the role of energy and what energy is playing in a massive shift in terms of the way to imagine energy. And I think the intervention of this young talent from Morocco talking about the need for regional integration, what's happening in East Med is absolutely staggering. Who would have thought that Egyptian gas would be imported from Israel, would be exported to northern Lebanon via Jordan, that Cyprus would perfectly be happy to monetize its reserves, and, as Her Excellency was saying, going through the Egyptian market. You would have an Abu Dhabi investment fund investing in some reserves and developing some fields in the Israeli waters. So definitely the integration is absolutely needed, once again, in order to reach the scale. And coming back, maybe, I don't know if it was a point or going too far in your question, Emiliano, but going back on what Andreas was saying, definitely the international market today is creating some opportunities for the MENA area and the whole Mediterranean basin. We've got to acknowledge as well it's creating some challenges. We have some countries which are depending massively on exports of energy, which do have a vision in 2050 that those exports will need to change. And facing the dual challenge, and exactly as Morocco has been successful in doing and moving forward in its energy transition, there is a dual challenge for those countries of working on their energy mix, national energy mix, but as well anticipating the changes in revenues that they would have from exports. So, both efforts on the domestic market and coping with a change on the demand side in their customer. So definitely something which is changing a lot, which doesn't give a lot of visibility to do 25 years investments. But let's acknowledge one thing, that the energy industry, private and public, has been really good sometimes at taking risk, even when there is a bit of uncertainty, and I think we will continue to do so.
Thank you so much. I think, Minister Pilides, you wanted to add something. Then I think we have a question from our change makers, as far as I understood. So please, Minister Pilides, if you wanted to follow up.
No, let's hear the question. I think Mr. Vivier has been very, very on point.
Okay, thank you so much. So is there any question coming from? Yes, please. I think somebody will bring you a microphone immediately, and thank you. If you can briefly introduce yourself and telling us to whom you are addressing your question. Thank you. Oh, that's a micro. So we have an opportunity to hear. Please.
Thank you very much, honorable guests. It's such an honor to be among you here. I'm very interested and worked actually on the EU relations with the southern Mediterranean countries, especially in terms of geopolitical, normative, and also energetic cooperation. So I have a question concerning the prospect that you have, considering the shift of the European interest towards the southern Mediterranean region as a new alternative to the Russian gas, especially in terms of the new discoveries, especially in Algeria, and also the project that could be very, very helpful for Europe, that is coming from the sub-Saharan pipeline that comes from Nigeria towards Algeria and to Italy through the Galsi pipeline, and also the Tunisian pipeline. And what do you think also about the geopolitical issues that are in the region that are impeding, especially the diplomatic problem of Algeria with Spain and also with Morocco especially in such a need? And the second part of the question considers the total policy towards the green energetic transition of the European Union that was set up for 2050. And do you think it is still credible to have such a great goal, especially in the changes that are in the region? And what do you think also about the prospects of our region to play in this transition, as we have tremendous renewable energy aspects, especially in terms of the green and the blue hydrogen? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. I didn't get your name, I do apologize.
I am Amin Barisha from Algeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I would shift the question in two parts. First, for Minister Pilides about the shifting landscape in terms of EU countries looking at southern Mediterranean, and the second half of your question, which was addressed, of course, to Mr. Vivier. So please, Minister Pilides.
Thank you. Yes, some very insightful questions there, and for sure, the EU needs to look at diversifying in a very open manner, and it needs to include pretty much, all energy sources. And I think Mr. Vivier mentioned earlier that there are some more mature sources and projects, and some sources and projects which are medium term or long term. And I think the key for the EU is to recognize that both need to be taken into consideration. There's no magic wand and no immediate solutions, and I think that's what this crisis has really brought out. But I think the crisis is an impetus and a catalyst in recognizing the problem and resolving it once and for all. And that means both long-term and short-term investment. So we need to be looking at all of the opportunities with a clear vision, as was said before, which has all the components in place. What do we do in the short term, which includes some tough measures sometimes, like cutting our own energy needs and trying to save energy as much as possible, whether that is unpleasant or not. And then how do we increase energy from different sources in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Obviously, the problem is that there's a big gap at the moment which cannot be covered because of the lack of because of how sudden this crisis was and how there was no plan in this direction that took the short term into account, because the transition was going to be a smoother transition which didn't involve any immediate changes. And so now, obviously, the needs are different, the plan needs to be different, but it still needs to be long term. And as I said earlier, I think we need to recognize that whatever change is made involves a lot of investment, including in pipelines, including in FSRUs for countries to be able to receive the natural gas. And so we need to be thinking about those investments, I think, in the context of the green transition. And I would agree with Mr. Vivier that, natural gas is a part of the green transition. We need to recognize that in order to be able to take these steps forward, and in order to not resort to even to forms of energy that are even worse for the environment, which we've seen in some cases in the EU already.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really have a few minutes. Mr. Vivier, there was a question about total policies. Your company is publicly engaged towards getting net zero by 2050, as far as I'm aware of. So how do you balance this policy, this goal, with what we've been talking about so far? Thank you.
Well, I think you're perfectly right in reminding, together with the EU and together with the overall society, we have taken this ambition and on board to be net zero by 2050. What I would like to say that the MENA area, Middle East and North Africa, is a perfect example for it. I just would like to say, and I was visiting Cyprus, so we talked about it with Her Excellency. I talk natural gas and I talk solar energy. There is not a single country which I visit today in order to develop what would be the kind of the traditional business of TotalEnergies. There is not a single discussion with an energy minister or an oil minister that does not include the renewable part. And it's not just coming from us. It is really a demand coming from those countries. Just to give you a few examples, we want to develop some new resources in Iraq. We will develop an oil field, but we will take the flaring down by basically using what is currently burnt as natural gas and bring it to some power plant so that it can make some electricity. We will develop a 1 gigawatt power plant in Iraq. I was in Libya. We want to invest, of course, in increasing the supply of natural gas in Libya, but as well, I was visiting a site south of Misrata where we develop a 500 megawatt solar power plant. I was in Algeria in July, where we signed for the extension of a contract, but which does include inside the contract a definite and quite substantial amount of money, which will be dedicated to reduce emissions for the exploitation of this field. So each single country, and you talk about NEON, of course, in Saudi Arabia, but you have equal examples suddenly in Qatar, in Abu Dhabi, in Oman, which was the introduction of this session. Definitely each single country is today asking for solutions which are not just the monetization of oil and gas resources, but as well including within this plan that we bring as TotalEnergies, including the participation in the energy transition of the country itself through, in particular, solar, reducing flaring, energy efficiency. And that's a big shift which is happening to us, and that's why I'm quite hopeful. The participant was asking, are we still hopeful about the 2050 net zero ambition? We are still hopeful, and the only thing we want to say is that it's not because you believe in natural gas that you're not hopeful for the 2050 net zero ambition. It's definitely something which is compatible, which will work out. We can maybe disagree, and there are plenty of ideas about how we reach this point. But ourselves, we are still convinced that we can do it as a company, but we can do it as a group, as a participant within civil society, and the EU in particular.
Mr. Vivier, time is running out, but I take the opportunity to having you today, and I'm thankful that you are available to be online with us today. I know it's a big issue, but in 30 seconds, if you can, you mentioned about many opportunities, dialogue with different countries, but still we know Total did not divest from Russia. These new opportunities might bring your company to do what other major companies did already after the beginning of the crisis.
I think in 20 seconds it would be difficult just to summarize exactly our position on Russia. No, just to say, I think we going beyond the debate on Russia, I think we've made our position extremely clear that we are not going to invest further in increasing the potential for production in Russia, and we will not take dividends from Russia. So basically, that's what we've committed to. And first and foremost, whatever sanctions the EU will take, whether it's existing on oil or possibly in the future on natural gas or LNG or whatever, of course, we will comply. So that's basically our approach toward Russia, and in full support of the Ukrainian people. What does it change for us? It's definitely, and it's not just for TotalEnergies, worldwide, when you talk about existing natural gas, which are resources which are already developed, you have a few hubs which were compatible with the supply to Europe. You had LNG, which was the Middle East and Mediterranean Sea, and the US, and you had Russia with pipeline and LNG. The fact that we will not invest in Russia anymore means that there is an increasing focus that we need to have on other sources in order to feed the European market with badly needed natural gas. The prices do show it. So we've started. We are developing projects. We have projects in Oman. We are going to invest in natural gas development in Algeria. We are going to invest in Libya. We are going, of course, to monetize the reserve that we are going to confirm in Cyprus. We've started production in Egypt for natural gas. We've won part of this tender I was talking about in Qatar. So definitely, the current crisis in Russia means that we have clarified our position vis-à-vis Russia, and definitely the future of natural gas and LNG for TotalEnergies is not there anymore. It's somewhere else, and we do focus on this, and we keep investing on this for the supply of the gas market.
Thank you so much for this answer, and thank you for being with us. Mr. Vivier from Total Energies is in touch with us, I guess, from Paris, and Minister Pilides from Nicosia, Cyprus. Thank you so much to our young change makers. We have tried to make it as energetic as possible, and it was a very, very interesting conversation. I know the program is still intense for the rest of the day, so thank you to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.